The grand old courthouse was alive with the usual morning bustle. Attorneys in press suits shuffling papers, bailiffs calling out names, and the low murmur of anxious families waiting for their cases to be called. Judge Harold Whitaker, a man whose silver hair and stern gaze had presided over this courtroom for more than 2 decades, sat high on the bench, scanning the docket with a practiced eye. He prided himself on his sharp wit and no-nonsense approach, and he was known for his impatience with anyone who wasted the court's time. On this particular morning, however, something unusual caught his attention. The next case on the docket was a minor civil dispute, nothing out of the ordinary, except for the defendant's name, Jamal Carter. When the bailiff called the case, a ripple of surprise moved through the courtroom as a teenager, no older than 16, stood up and walked confidently to the defendant's table. Jamal wore a simple T-shirt and jeans, his posture relaxed but his eyes alert, scanning the room with a quiet intelligence. Judge Whitaker arched an eyebrow, glancing at the paperwork in front of him. "Mr. Carter, are you representing yourself today?" he asked, his tone tinged with disbelief. Jamal nodded. "Yes, Your Honor. I'll be handling my own defense." A few people in the gallery chuckled, and even the opposing counsel, a seasoned attorney named Ms. Reynolds, smirked at the sight of the young man standing alone. Judge Whitaker leaned forward, his voice dripping with skepticism. "You do realize, young man, that this is a court of law, not a school debate club? Are you sure you wouldn't prefer to have a real attorney represent you?" Jamal met the judge's gaze without flinching. "I'm sure, Your Honor. I've read the case file and I'm prepared to proceed." The judge shook his head, clearly amused. "Very well, but don't expect any special treatment. The law is the law, no matter how old you are." Jamal nodded again, his expression calm. As the proceedings began, Ms. Reynolds presented her case with the confidence of someone who had done this 1,000 times. She laid out the facts, cited precedents, and made her arguments with practiced ease. When it was Jamal's turn, he stood and addressed the court with clarity and poise that belied his age. He cited statutes, referenced case law, and cross-examined witnesses with precision that left the courtroom silent. Judge Whitaker watched, his initial amusement giving way to curiosity, then to something like respect. By the time Jamal finished his defense, even Ms. Reynolds looked unsettled, glancing at her notes as if searching for a weakness in his argument. The judge called a brief recess, retreating to his chambers with a furrowed brow. In the hallway, whispers spread like wildfire. Who was this kid? How did he know so much about the law? And what would the judge do next? As Jamal sat quietly at the defense table, waiting for the judge to return, he allowed himself a small, satisfied smile. He had come here to prove a point, not just about the case, but about himself. And he was just getting started. When Judge Whitaker returned to the bench, the atmosphere in the courtroom had shifted. Previously filled with skepticism and muffled laughter, the gallery now buzzed with anticipation. Even the court reporter, who had seen her share of odd cases, found herself leaning forward, eager to see what would happen next. The judge cleared his throat, his tone more measured than before. "Mr. Carter, I must admit your presentation was unexpectedly thorough. I'd like to hear your cross-examination of the plaintiff's witness." Jamal stood, his notes organized in a neat stack, and approached the witness stand with a confidence that seemed to grow with every step. The plaintiff's main witness, a middle-aged man named Mr. Hargrove, shifted uncomfortably as Jamal began his questioning. "Mr. Hargrove, you stated earlier that you saw me on the property at 7:30 p.m. on the night in question. Is that correct?" The man nodded, glancing nervously at Ms. Reynolds. "That's what I said, yes." Jamal nodded, flipping through his notes. "And you also testified that the security lights were not working that evening, correct?" "Yes, that's right." Jamal paused, then looked up. "So, if the security lights were out and it was after sunset, how were you able to identify me from over 50 feet away?" The courtroom fell silent. Mr. Hargrove hesitated, his face reddening. "Well, I thought it was you. Your step was familiar to me." Jamal pressed on, his tone respectful but relentless. "Isn't it true, Mr. Hargrove, that you've never actually spoken to me before? That your only interaction with me was seeing me in passing at the community center? The witness stammered, I suppose that's true, yes. Jamal nodded, then turned to the judge. Your Honor, I'd like to submit into evidence the security camera footage from the community center, which shows that I was there until 7:45 p.m. on the night in question. Ms. Reynolds objected, but Jamal calmly cited the rules of evidence, explaining why the footage was admissible. Judge Whitaker, now fully engaged, overruled the objection and allowed the footage to be played. The video clearly showed Jamal at the community center at the time Mr. Hargrove claimed to have seen him elsewhere. The gallery murmured, and Ms. Reynolds looked flustered for the first time. Jamal continued his cross-examination, gently but firmly dismantling the plaintiff's case. He pointed out inconsistencies in the testimony, highlighted gaps in the evidence, and even referenced a recent appellate decision that supported his position. Judge Whitaker watched with growing astonishment, occasionally glancing at the bailiff as if confirmed that this was really happening. Jamal returned to his seat after finishing, his eyes shining with quiet triumph but his face remaining composed. The judge called for closing arguments, and Ms. Reynolds, now visibly rattled, struggled to regain her composure. She delivered her closing statement, but her usual confidence was gone. When it was Jamal's turn, he spoke with clarity and conviction, summarizing the facts, the law, and the reasons why the case should be dismissed. He ended with a simple statement. Your Honor, justice isn't about age or appearance. It's about truth, and the truth is on my side. The courtroom was silent as Judge Whitaker took it all in. He announced that he would take the matter under advisement and issue a ruling the next day. As the court adjourned, people crowded around Jamal, some offering congratulations, others simply staring in disbelief. Ms. Reynolds approached him, her tone respectful. You're quite the advocate, Mr. Carter. May I inquire where you learned all of this? Jamal smiled. I've been studying law since I was 12. My mom's an attorney, and I've always loved the challenge. He couldn't stop thinking as he watched the conversation from the bench. He had never seen anything like this, and he suspected that Jamal's story was far from over. The courthouse was abuzz the next morning, the story of the teenage legal prodigy having spread far beyond the courtroom's walls. Local reporters gathered outside, hoping to catch a glimpse of Jamal Carter as he arrived, while courthouse staff whispered excitedly in the hallways. Even Judge Whitaker, who prided himself on his unflappable demeanor, felt a twinge of anticipation as he reviewed his notes in chambers. The security footage, the cited case law, and the young man's extraordinary performance had consumed him for the majority of the previous evening. When court was called to order, the gallery was packed. Jamal entered quietly, dressed in the same simple clothes, but with a new air of confidence. Ms. Reynolds, the opposing counsel, greeted him with a nod of respect, and even Mr. Hargrove, the plaintiff's witness, seemed chastened by the previous day's events. Judge Whitaker took the bench, his expression serious but not unkind. Before I issue my ruling, he began, I want to address something that has become clear to everyone in this courtroom. Mr. Carter, your knowledge of the law, your composure, and your advocacy are nothing short of remarkable. I have presided over thousands of cases, and I have rarely seen such skill from someone so young. The judge paused, glancing at the packed gallery. It is not the court's place to speculate on how you acquired your expertise, but I would be remiss if I did not acknowledge it. He turned to the matter at hand. Having reviewed the evidence, including the security footage and the testimony presented, I find that the plaintiff has not met the burden of proof. The case is dismissed. A wave of applause swept through the gallery, and Jamal allowed himself a small, satisfied smile. But Judge Whitaker wasn't finished. Mr. Carter, I would like to speak with you in chambers after court adjourns. The request sent another ripple through the room, and Jamal nodded, gathering his papers as the judge called the next case. When the session ended, Jamal made his way to the judge's chambers, where Whitaker greeted him with a handshake. Sit down, son, the judge said, his tone softer than had been in court. I have to admit, you caught me off guard. I was dismissive, and for that, I apologize. However, I must inquire, how did you learn all of this? Jamal explained how he had grown up surrounded by law books, his mother a public defender who often brought her work home. He described his fascination with legal puzzles, his habit of reading case law for fun, and his participation in online mock trials and debate forums. "I know I don't look like a lawyer, Your Honor," Jamal said, "but I've spent years preparing for this. I wanted to prove that anyone, regardless of age or background, can master the law if they work hard enough." Judge Whitaker listened, his skepticism replaced by admiration. "You have a gift, Jamal, and you have a responsibility to use it wisely. I'd like to introduce you to some colleagues, judges, attorneys, maybe even a few law professors. You ought to receive guidance from the best." Jamal's eyes widened in surprise, but he nodded eagerly. "I am grateful, Your Honor. I'd appreciate that." The judge smiled. "And one more thing. If you ever decide to go to law school, let me know. I'll write your recommendation myself." As Jamal left the chambers, he felt a sense of validation that went beyond winning the case. He had earned the respect of the court, not by pretending to be something he wasn't, but by showing the world what he truly was, a legal mind to be reckoned with, no matter his age. The weeks that followed Jamal Carter's astonishing day in court marked the beginning of a new chapter. Not just for Jamal, but for everyone who had witnessed his quiet brilliance. News of the teenage attorney spread quickly, first through the local press and then to national outlets, with headlines marveling at the young man who had out-argued seasoned lawyers and earned the respect of a veteran judge. Jamal's story became a beacon for young people everywhere, a testament to the power of self-education, perseverance, and the courage to defy expectations. Invitations poured in from law schools, debate clubs, and youth organizations eager to hear him speak. Judge Whitaker, true to his word, introduced Jamal to a network of legal professionals who were both skeptical and intrigued. At a luncheon hosted by the city's Bar Association, Jamal found himself seated between a Supreme Court justice and a renowned civil rights attorney, both of whom peppered him with questions about his legal interests and future ambitions. Jamal answered with the same calm clarity he had shown in court, never boasting, always crediting his mother and mentors for nurturing his curiosity and discipline. Currently, Ms. Reynolds, his opponent in court, became one of his most outspoken supporters. She invited Jamal to intern her firm, where he quickly impressed the partners with his research skills and his ability to see legal issues from fresh angles. The firm's clients, initially surprised to see a teenager in the conference room, soon came to trust his insights and admired his humility. Jamal's mother, proud but never surprised, watched as her son navigated the sudden attention with grace. She counseled him to maintain his composure, continue learning, and make use of his talents to assist others. Jamal took her advice to heart, volunteering at local youth centers to teach kids about their rights and the basics of the legal system. He started a blog, breaking down complex legal concepts into plain language, and soon had a following of students, teachers, and even a few judges. Judge Whitaker, for his part, found himself reflecting on his own career and the assumptions he had carried into the courtroom that day. He began to champion mentorship programs for young people interested in the law, encouraging his colleagues to look beyond appearances and to nurture talent wherever it appeared. He invited Jamal to co-host a series of workshops at the courthouse, where students from all backgrounds could learn about the justice system and even participate in mock trials. The workshops became so popular that the courthouse had to add extra sessions to accommodate the demand. Jamal, once a subject of skepticism and mockery, became a symbol of what was possible when barriers were broken and minds were opened. Jamal's influence grew steadily over the course of the months. He was invited to speak at national conferences, featured in documentaries, and even consulted on legal education reform. Yet through it all, he remained the same thoughtful, curious young man who had once sat quietly at the defendant's table, determined to prove himself on his own terms. He never forgot the lessons of that first case: the importance of preparation, the value of humility, and the power of believing in oneself even when others do not. On the anniversary of his courtroom debut, the courthouse hosted a celebration in his honor. Judge Whitaker gave a moving speech, recalling the day he had underestimated a teenager and learned a lesson he would never forget. Jamal Carter reminded us all, the judge said, that genius knows no age and that the law belongs to everyone who seeks justice with an honest heart. As the crowd applauded, Jamal took the stage, his voice steady and full of hope. "I'm grateful for every challenge, every doubt, and every opportunity to learn," he said. "If my story means anything, let it be this. Never let anyone else define your limits. Work hard, stay curious, and remember that the pursuit of justice is open to all." As Jamal looked out at the faces of friends, mentors, and future dreamers, the room erupted in cheers, and he knew that his journey was just beginning. The legacy he had started, one of courage, intellect, and the refusal to be underestimated, would inspire generations to come, both inside and far beyond the walls of the courtroom.